it's so important then for us to, on our all throughout our journey, as I said, in teenagers and young adults, motherhood, and into our elder years, to be together. What's your experience been of women together in the church, in the heart of the church, serving and loving God our Father?
It's funny, just as you talked about, the image. I remember, I think it was 1984. I can't remember. There was some big win that Ireland got, and we were staying with my aunt, who was a sister, religious sister. There was 4 or 5 nuns in the convent, and the Irish team were coming home on the bus. They were coming down um, O'Connell Street in Dublin, and like the whole nation was in Dublin to meet them. And the nuns were in this huge dilemma whether to give us dinner or to go into Dublin to see the boys. And the nuns themselves were just going, "We won, we won, we won, Trace, we won." I was so tiny, like I was only like 10 or 11 at the time. And I thought they were la, but my brother was so impacted that these nuns knew about football and they knew about this international match. So we all went into Dublin, and the open top bus and the team coming home, and Paki Bana holding the cup up.
Oh,
And it was
love it.
it was a really glorious win. And it was just like, but it was that sense of we won, those boys won for us. Um, and I think if we could look at the church in the same view, if we could say that we are team players for the church, if we could try our hardest to have the winning goal for Jesus, to have that, whatever is the goal of our life or the goal of our work or the goal of our family, that we're trying to get it into the net of Jesus, which ultimately is probably his sacred heart. We're kicking into his sacred heart all the time, and we want the victory to be his. We want everything, every effort that we make has to be for the good of others. And it's the church is the only place I have found that, the only place I have found an expectation of me to go higher, to be better. I did find at the end of my schooling that there was a bit of a blah, like, sure, do it if you can and make the most of it. There'll always be something to do. Whereas the church, I found, as I got more involved in apostolic ministry, it was like, how can we make this better? How can we make it clearer? How can we bring this teaching in a more sound way to people? So there was this sense of improvement all the time. And the irony is that most of my friends, when they left school, whether they left at 16, 18, or 23, 24 after degrees, they had no desire for learning left. They had none. They were just like, I am done with books. I am done with learning. But I have found that the more I've got involved in the church, the more I've got involved in HLI, the more I've got involved in Youth 2000, I want to learn more. I want to know more. I want to read more. And I want to share more. I'm glancing down like I have my catechism. I want to know more of the church's teaching on woman, on family, on the world, on ecology, economy, whatever it is. The church has something to say, and our whole lives can be improved if we are winning for the team, if we're inserting ourselves to make the church better. Not changing her teaching, but maybe translating her teaching to those who don't know it yet.
Yeah, I agree. It's so strange because I'm the same. You're really, at this stage of your life, it's like the time when you have the least amount of time to read and learn. And that's when the desire is placed in your heart going, Lord, what is this all about?
Yeah,
I wish
yeah.
I had hours to read these books
Yeah.
and I don't have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank God
But
for
yeah,
Audible.
and I can't even do it. I'm a reader. I need
Uh-huh.
to have it in front of me. But I think as well, with the togetherness of the church, it is bringing together, yes, the learning, the growing, the stretching, but
Yeah,
also the times of comfort and sorrow and
that's
pain
right.
that we can, as I said, it's back to that idea of perspective. The perspective of pain is different when you look at it through the lens of faith. And
Yeah,
I do believe only other sisters in faith can understand when you're going through a particular
that's
pain,
right.
because the pain doesn't go away, but it is in a different perspective when you're looking at it from a heavenly lens, when you're
That's right.
looking at,
That's right.
that you talked about miscarriage, when you're looking at the loss of a child
That's
through
right.
miscarriage, there's always a hope there. There's a certain amount of peace there. And of course, as I said, the pain is no different.
That's right.
And it's so important that women come together at the well.
Yeah,
They come together over the kitchen, over a cup of tea. They come together to walk the journey together. I think it's so
that's right.
important
Yeah, yeah.
that we're not isolated. And I mean, you've been a very good friend to me over the years, the cup of tea, or maybe at the beach. Teresa's tea at the beach is a whole.
My
I've never
living room
seen
on the pier.
I have never seen anybody like this woman at the beach. You've got the crock pot, you've the tea, you've got the whole works.
We're just starting the season again now. It's great. The sun shines back. But even that, like we found over the years, like we do this like mad shebang at the beach, and we try and live our summers at the beach. But it's an outreach as well. Like kids come and they join our family, and some of them might be in the faith, some of them might not be. But we'll do rosaries, we'll play football, we'll have barbecues, we'll try and start with mass if we can, or we'll meet after mass. And it's that Catholicity isn't just your Sunday mass. It should be weaved into our approach. And, you know, we've had a couple of kids who are a bit loose lipped or a bit loose, whatever, loose clothed. And, you know, we're kind of, these are friends of ours, so, you know, you must be cold there with nothing on. Let me put this over you, you know, and trying to just encourage them in the walk and love them through whatever decisions they're making. And also just trying to get people to think, you know. I think, yeah, like it's beautiful imagery of the women at the well. Jesus came to meet the woman at the well. Like it was a normal place to be, at the well, gathering your water with other women at that time of the day. Um, and I think we have forgotten, perhaps in our digital era, we've forgotten that we need to meet one another. We need to pray for one another. We need to support one another. I remember over my first miscarriage, it was like a friend of mine had had a miscarriage in Dublin, and she had allowed us into her pain. This was a couple of years before. But because she had done that, I was able to go through mine with the grace and the knowledge and the blessing of her experience in faith and how she did it. And then in turn, since I've had mine, there's been many people asking me questions and how do you do it? And physically, how do you go through this? And what do I need to do? What do I need to prepare? Can I call the priest? What happens? Does the baby get blessed? All those questions. But I got all of my answers from the women at the well, and the wellspring being the church. So my Catholic women, my go-to hub of church knowledge. And it's not that theological knowledge, it's that pastoral knowledge, it's that the care of the heart, the love of the heart, the cups of tea, as you say, and understanding, but also calling people higher and not allowing them to stay stuck. And I don't mean for any moment to pull people out of a grief abruptly. What I mean is to escort them through it, like you mentioned, to that place of hope that there is more, there is something else to do.
But when you take that idea of temporary bonds and people being casual with sex and everything else, when you take that to its extreme, even culture turns its nose down at people that have multiple partners. So it's the if you're trying to listen to the culture, she's lying all the time. I say she, but the culture's permanently lying to you, because young people can't make sense of what it is that balance between too few or too many. When we go to the extreme, even the culture rejects the fact that people have had multiple partners. You mentioned that in one of your books, or in your book, with regard to marriage preparation. You young people, you hear about sow your oats, or young people, they need to get experience, but you can explain it better than me how ridiculous that is when you come to meet the one. We always hear about the one, the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. It's not really something you want to share about how much experience you've had.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost to the point of being funny. But can I just go back to, and I'll come to that in a moment. I just want to rewind to something you said a moment ago, Lisa, about you were touching on again people who have led broken lives, or have maybe experienced a conversion later in their life, or in their 30s or late 20s, after sowing the wild oats, they suddenly come to see the truth and the wisdom and the beauty of the Catholic teaching for human sexuality. When we talk about when people fail to respect the God inscribed natural order of things start to become unstuck. That shouldn't translate into, we're not saying that, oh gosh, well, if you've been around the block, if you've lived a fairly free and easy life, you're sunk, you're done, you'll never, you're not capable of forming a relationship. That's not what we're saying. We're talking in the main. We're talking, this is the overall trend. And if you don't find, if by God's grace, or however way it comes to you, if you don't find a way through, you're far more likely to just to miss the point. But it doesn't mean in any given instance, oh, so you have a history, forget it. What's the phrase? Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. So, but the whole thing is the myth of experience. Let me give you a quote that I have in the book. This lady, she says, I find the whole experience thing comical. How exactly do your friends think this experience is going to help them? What do they think their future husband will say to this? Honey, guess what? I built up my marriage resume through sexual relations with other people. I got HPV and you'll get it too, but at least I'll know what I'm doing. Okay, it's dark humor, I'll admit that, but it's making the point that, like, experience of what exactly? The experience, if you want experience that will serve you well in marriage, get experience of sacrifice. Get experience of getting up early in the morning. get experience of self-control, get experience of delayed gratification, because, okay, I'm speaking as a poor celibate, what would I know? But I hear from a lot of people, and I can see it with my 2 eyes and hear it with my 2 ears. These are the things that are required to make a marriage work. Okay, not a great big cartload of sexual experience with multiple partners and so on. That's not particularly, yes, it's formative, but it's not the right kind of formation. The experience of sacrifice, self-control, deferred gratification, gently growing intimacy, that's much more realistic preparation than building up a sexual CV, and it makes a broader point as well, the whole thing of, and I'm not doing a curmudgeonly decrying of gap years. I know there can be something to said for the whole thing of gap years, but with a degree of caution. I mean, if we take time out just to get away from living as a responsible, let's say, novice adult, if that's what a gap year is understood to be, then I'd say that's bad news. That's not good. If a gap year is, okay, going broaden the mind via travel, maybe do some voluntary work, whatever it might be, that's great. But if it's simply standing aside from the stream of life and growth and maturity and the capacity to commitment, that's the wrong kind of a gap. I mean, let's face it, if a young guy spends his 20s sowing his wild oats, moving from one temporary relationship to another, can we really expect him in his 30s easily to settle into a married life of sacrificial self-giving? I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it's going to need some kind of a conversion. And conversions are not that common. Thanks be to God, the Lord in His grace, if that young man or that young woman, if they meet, if they are convinced and convicted about the good sense and the wisdom of the church's teaching, and they commit to live by it, of course the Lord will be with them and He'll help them, and their past will not be a millstone around their neck. But these things are unlikely to happen in the general sense of a society that's so broken and understands things so poorly. We can't just stand aside from responsibility and then expect in that way by some miracle to be growing as people of responsibility and of self-giving. So the experiencing is really.
That's a very interesting point. There's a whole new topic, the whole idea, of the gap year, and the whole idea of marriage preparation. We really need to do a full show on that. Yeah, I think there's so much, like you say, and the rosary helps to do that, to contemplate Our Lady, contemplate her life, contemplate the reality of her life, the early days of the workings of God in her, and the miraculous, incarnation of Christ, but then obviously the suffering as well that she went through. And that's something that our culture just wants to eradicate. I've said it before in many episodes, it just wants to press the delete button to a life that's inconvenient or to any kind of a suffering, huge pushes for euthanasia. But I think one of the beautiful themes also that really is captured in this section is the theme of fruitfulness. Yeah. Both physical and spiritual fruitfulness. And you talk about, anything that you give a woman, she'll make it greater. Can you elaborate a wee bit on that? I thought that was a really beautiful way to look at womanhood.
Yeah, it's a quote that I will not be able to quote off the top of my head, but it really is this idea that, if you give a woman groceries, she'll make you an amazing meal. Just that gift of hospitality. If you entrust that the marital embrace brings about children, this isn't just something that's sterile, that there's something that fruitful and good that comes from it. And I think this is really the beauty of woman, is that we can take very simple things. I'm sure you probably know women in your life that they may not have a lot of material wealth, but they can take the smallest things and suddenly it's either a beautiful meal or a beautiful room or a beautiful picnic, that kind of creativity and ingenuity. So I think that is a crucial element. And, a lot of this really comes back to this idea of mothering and motherhood as well, which has become very taboo kind of language. But that's really what it means, is to shelter and protect and provide for others in a way that they can then become who God made them to be, instead of blocking that or inhibiting that. And I think that is a helpful way to start looking at what fruitfulness is really kind of opening doors, or, it's almost, gardening is a great example of this, pulling out the weeds and tending to something, making sure the soil is right, all of those things. And this is what women just kind of do instinctively in their homes, largely because our body is a home, biologically when we have children. So all of these things extend out both psychologically, but also spiritually. And I think we can see the beauty of that in the spiritual motherhood of female religious, which is another area that has really taken a hit because of the anti-Marian culture, and that denigration of what religious nuns do, because it looks like they don't really do anything in our culture that values so much busyness.
Yeah.
So there's really a lot that we have to chew on, particularly as Catholics, because we have religious, because we have all these amazing saint women to really show us kind of this archetype, and obviously in addition to who Our Lady is as well.
And it's fundamental then to culture. I'm sure that's sort of, what you maybe look at in your next book. But you quoted Archbishop Fulton Sheen, and I'm sure many of our viewers will be familiar with the quote: "When a man loves a woman, it follows that the nobler the woman, the nobler the love. The higher the demands made by the woman, the more worthy a man must be. And that's why woman is the measure of the level of our civilization." And we can't underestimate our power, because the ironic thing is that the feminists want power, but they don't understand that we have that power, like within us, within our bodies, in our dignity as children of God, but also within our womanhood and our relationship to children, to the next generation. And it's just ironic that they kind of misinterpret what power is and manipulate this sort of, like you say, the vices, and not the beauty of the power that we do. And you can see that in your own motherhood. I'm sure, as a homeschool mum, you can see the influence that you have on your children, and the power that God's given us to mold hearts and minds. And it's a huge part of this whole battle to rescue the culture, is to mold the hearts and minds of the next generation through their parents.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think, there's this amazing tension too, because we've been told as women, we sort of need to become like men, but not even good men, not even the virtues that men embody, but it's more like the worst of men. And so it's this strange struggle that they've created in women is, I want to be just like you, but I also hate you. I hate, the toxic masculinity that they're describing, which is slightly different than the way I use toxic femininity. But it's this tension of that's there, that men need to change and become more like women, even though we want to be just like men. So that's the really remarkable thing, is just what a disservice we've done to ourselves, because it really ultimately does, like I said, weaken us and make us incredibly vulnerable on all these different levels that we can't anticipate, because we're just so caught up in the fashion of it and the sensibility of it, and really the kind of control that's been exerted on us by it. I think of which, most of us are scarcely aware of how really indoctrinated we have been by the movement over these last 50 years.
But and then I know we're sort of digressing into marriage a little bit from just the Sodry Men's theme, but I just wanted to tie on to what you're saying, because again, I do watch Jordan Peterson, and he talks about the chain together when now, because their divorce is such an option, men and women aren't hammering these things out because they're not chained together anymore. He refers to the fact that you're chained together means you have no other option but to work through and wrestle and have that war. People are now giving up because they don't want a war. And it's back again to what you were talking about, men needing to debate. I think society in general needs to debate and fight a lot more often than it's doing. We're so one-dimensional. We're so quick tags, Twitter, 20 characters or whatever you're allowed. And no one actually will have a full-on Barney, a full-on conversation and hammer things out. And that's where, like you say, the beauty comes, the spark comes, the life comes. And it is endemic in society. It's such a shame. We've so many things to battle against. There's so many undercurrents with regard to, I've said, work, communication, education is failing us, and then all everything, the rug has been pulled from under us. But I know we're heading towards the end of this conversation, although I could talk to you for hours, but I always said I would love to bring in the hope, and we haven't talked much about sort of where the church stands in all of this. I'd love you to sort of reflect for men and for marriage and for society, what the church gives men in terms of an ideal, in terms of this Christ-like devotion and sacrifice, and something to aim for.
I would point out to men that in Christianity, as in and this is worth listening to, as in most of the primitive tribes, it is the ability to endure in a man which is revered more than his ability to inflict. It is his sacrificial propensity, his sacrificial suitability, his ability to suffer without crying out. And that there is a path there. It's obscure. Okay, it's going to take work, it's going to take discussion. There is a path there for men to discover their masculinity in the modern age, and crucially through their Christian faith, because the model in this is our Lord Jesus Christ, who is the ultimate sacrifice that the ancient human sacrificing peoples only dreamt of. Because what they were doing in human sacrifice was an attempt to propitiate the deity with the most exquisite thing they could offer, which was a human being in full health and in the glory of their relative youth. Okay? And our Lord Jesus Christ is God sacrificed back to God. It is the greatest sacrificial material that was ever produced. And he is the template. There's nothing weak about this. Anyone who thinks this is weak knows nothing about life. There's nothing weak about this. I mean, most people who are good at inflicting pain are psychopaths, and they don't count because there's something wrong with them. There's a kink in them. They're not right in the head. Actually, it's very difficult in war to get soldiers to start killing each other. It only becomes habitual after a while. That's notoriously true. I say notorious because in war, like, that can be a huge problem. You know, the first battle could be the last one, like. And this thing of endurance is huge for men. And I wonder whether down the line there won't be, well, Gandhi made use of it, and contrary to what people think, Gandhi was not a pacifist. Gandhi made use of it, which is simply exposing yourself to taking a beating, either from the opposition or from police, in order to make a moral point. And that there may be an issue there with regard to the future form that protests against abortion will take. Because I'm telling you, this obsession we have with safety has led us into murder. We are murdering. This is the insane paradox we have entered. We are murdering to prevent murder. We are killing to prevent killing. In order to be safe, we're making others profoundly unsafe. The womb isn't safe, so that those who are alive and can defend themselves and are articulate can be safe. This is insane. Mm-hmm. And it's done through, I mean, the Greeks would have died laughing at us. You know, the whole myth of Prometheus, everything, stealing fire from the gods. I think, wasn't that what he did? And then he was punished forever afterwards. They would have died laughing at it. They'd have said, oh, there's more of it. You know, they want to be safe. They want to be like God. They want to be God. Yeah. They want to be God. But we're not God. We shall be like him because we shall see him as he really is, as the scriptures tell us, but not yet. We're not God. The Ukraine is quite clear we're not God. In Libya, it's clear we're not God. Okay. In Iraq, it's very clear. And Syria, and jeepers, you can keep going. It's very clear we're not God. Okay. But we do hanker to be like him.
I'm so grateful to you for sharing that. I can just picture that these two 20-year-olds in the back of a car, no escape, 4 days of a testimony. And again, maybe people don't realize what these days are like with HLI. So I want you just to share a couple of your memories of it. What was it that you think you learned at the event, and why do you think that touched all of your hearts? I know there were a few different dimensions, a few different people that you encountered. Just very briefly, so that anyone who wants to go to the next HLI event can get a wee taste for it.
Well, first of all, it was HLI Activists Weekend. You know, so that was dealing with you know, the opposite idea of, you know, supporting abortion, and then we were sort of being trained up, as it were, to actually bring up the positives about life and so on. And I think, well, first of all, we wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been for Una, because it was Una really seen the initial advertisement. But what I got from that weekend, I was very challenged with it all. I couldn't actually debate the positives of it, because I was just too emotional about the idea that anybody would ever harm the most innocent of life, the life that cannot, protect itself, in other words, in the womb. So I was a bit paralysed by the whole thing, but I seen how well Una and Shane and Claire dealt with it. Like, they just were able to rise and bring up the arguments and so on. So for me, I realised that I had so much to learn. And that's what I went away from there, thinking, okay, I may be slow at learning this, but I'm going to stick with it. And this is the path I want to be on, is to do whatever I can, whatever little I can do to actually support this cause. So I know Una had a different view on it.
Not different, but I would say you've got two sets of age group, our age group, and then you had Shane and Claire, who were their late teens, early 20s. And at that weekend, there was the Pure at Heart were there. So there was other young people of that age group. So they immediately connected with that. But here, for the first time, we were hearing the truth about the Catholic Church, about our faith, that we'd never heard really spoken of in such depth before, just not about life, but about marriage, the sacredness of, life, marriage, prayer life, all of that. It was just so rich that weekend. It was beautiful. And the people that were there presenting it, I had never come across anything like it before. And I just came away thinking, wow, our faith is so rich. It's so deep. There's so much here that we can learn and grow from. It's just like the light had come on after so many years of darkness, So, and at that same time then, we went to Medjugorje. So there was a number of different things at that time that sort of just really resonated with us and literally turned us around, because we even started saying the rosary together, as a family. We hadn't done that for years. We may have prayed, but we'd never said the rosary together. So, that on that weekend, like, we had mass every day. We had only gone once a week. So there, the thought of we could do this every day. We could go to mass every day. So thank God we're able to do that. So there was so much just from that weekend, that I'm just so grateful that the four of us were there. And even coming home in the car, the conversation we had, the openness. Like, we were talking about things that you just wouldn't have talked about before. And then obviously Shane and Claire went on. They joined Youth 2000, and that has reaped so many wonderful things, so many wonderful friends, and taken them in their directions as well, which we're so grateful. And that actually our son Shane has met his wife Tanya at Youth 2000, and they got married, and they have a beautiful daughter. So the Lord has just blessed us so much, but that's because I think HLI just were there when we really needed that as a family, so we are so grateful for it.
Oh, it's such a beautiful story. It's so good. And we know that HLI are only working for God. We're only, the hand of God. It's the Holy Spirit that was pursuing you. It's God the Father, God the Son that had been pursuing you for all of those fantastic foundations that you had laid together. Because you had done so much and you had served him so well. But obviously the crises and the challenges, can really throw anyone off course. And that's our privilege, is to be able to be in any way in service to God, that he can reach the people that he is so dying to reach, literally. Well, folks, thank you so much for that. I'm really, really privileged that you shared your very special story with us.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thanks for inviting us.
So, folks, don't forget that we at HLI Ireland are working and praying for an Ireland where God is first, life is sacred, and the family is cherished. And you've heard of the fruits of our work. Please get involved, get in touch, let us know how our work is touching your life. Help us to share the good news. And you can join us next week. This is only the first week of our theme of Marriage Matters. Next week, I'm joined by Father Chris Hayden. We'll look a little bit more into what the church teaches about the sacrament of marriage. But until then, good night. It's still the daytime. I hope. Depends what time you're watching. But thank you for joining us, and God bless.